Yeah, I mean, intimacy is connection. It is connection. And there's five different subtypes of intimacy. There's a spiritual intimacy. How well do you know each other and your thoughts and ideas about spirituality, about um, religion, even about connecting to your higher self. I mean, think about intimate partners. That's a spiritual connection that you have with that person, and it comes from your story of how you met. What happened that the two of you crossed your paths in the timing of that path? There's some spiritual connection to that. Um,
Welcome to another episode of We're Not Okay, a community of healing. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Antia Allen, and I'm joined by my co host.
Justin Stewart here.
And we are excited to bring another amazing episode to you. We have the honor of being joined by Dr. Alicia Watkins. Dr. Watkins is a full professor of social work and licensed clinical therapist with over 20 years of experience helping families and individuals navigate complex emotional and psychological challenges. She's also the founder of Coaching with Dr. Alicia LLC. Thank you, Dr. Alicia, for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so great. Well, I am okay, but I'm not okay with a lot of things. But how are you guys doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. I think we feel the same way. Not okay with a lot of things.
With a lot of things.
Well, I want to jump right in. We don't want to take up too much of your time, but we want the audience to get to know you a little bit better. Although from what I've seen, I think quite a few people know you already.
Oh, really? Okay.
That you're on Instagram, you're on YouTube, you're all over the place doing different interviews on a variety of different topics. But before we get deeper into a lot of those topics that you discussed, we wanted to learn a little bit more about you and your role and your work as a licensed clinical therapist and a coach. So if you can give us a little bit of background and maybe even the motivation to starting that work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like my background is a continuation of the household of which I grew up in. So my parents were part of the 60s movement, the anti-war, fight the power sort of movement. And my mom used to make dashikis and she made green bean pies, and they were part of the not so much burning her bra or so with the feminist movement, but definitely two hippies who were like, my dad is also a social worker and my mom is a therapist as well. And so I just grew up in this sort of household where my parents were a little older when they had me, and they were had advanced degrees in child development. So I feel unusual in the sense where I was never spanked growing up, and I feel like I am continuing a second generation of healing our community. And growing up and being born in Tuskegee, Alabama, which is the ground zero of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. I was born right there in that hospital, John Andrews Hospital, which at the time was one of the only hospitals in the South that would even look at Black people. And so that was like a historic beginning, I think. And then I was raised in Gary, Indiana. And so these are the two most devastating. We're talking about the crack era in the 1980s. And so my parents were part of the healing, almost as if it was a battle Black people were in this country. And so that's my orientation. So I am such a progressive person. I am very kind of peace and love and, and all of that sort of background. And so that's what I fuse into my practice. It was just natural for me to get into social work and some of the research that I'm doing and some of the causes that I'm taking up. Of course, my parents are retired now, and my dad has passed on, but just uh, that continuing that energy of raising awareness and speaking out and using my voice and my platform to talk about some issues that are pretty complex. And I think a lot of people now are oversimplifying a lot of the issues where it is, we got to deconstruct some of these things. And the issue of Black people in America need to be discussed and there's nuances to all of these things. And so that's what I try to do on my platform and in my practice with individual work. But if you're any clinician out there, you get tired of just working with one person, here and there. You want to make a bigger impact on the macro level. And so that's why, as gosh, I think as a therapist, it's the individual level. As a college professor, working in the meso kind of macro level, but of course, putting my information out there and just using my voice on a larger platform to deal with some of these macro issues that affect Black people.
And so you have a very rich history. It
Hmm.
sounds like, especially coming from such a I don't know if I almost think about it as like a holistic kind of like
Hmm.
family of, focusing more on healing and focusing and not and away from maybe physical punishment. And then the fact that you're carrying on that same legacy is I think amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It wasn't until I thought about it that I was like, oh, this is what I'm doing. It was just so ingrained in me. I never really looked up until I started reflecting on my life and my career and the decisions that I made. I wasn't even conscious of it. The subconscious mind is so powerful. I just naturally fell into this area. So thank you for commenting on that.
No problem. So one thing that you mentioned was our people, Black people, and I know that from following you on Instagram and hearing about different topics that you discuss, one of those is Black relationships, right? And so one thing I wanted to point out was a statistic I found, which says that Black women have the highest rates of first divorce across all racial and ethnic groups, with one study showing 30.4 divorces per 1,000 women in a first marriage. And it also says that most divorces are initiated by women due to unmet emotional needs and poor
Mhm.
communication in marriage. And so that leads me to one of the topics that I saw that stood out to me, was mindful communication and this idea of mindful communication in relationships. And I think one of the things that I saw that you said was, um, the way you speak can create danger or safety in
Mhm.
a relationship. And so I would love to hear more about that, because that is one of my struggles in my own relationship is communication. And sometimes I'm told my tone is the issue, and I'm like, oh, how do I correct my tone? I don't know. I'm like, this is the way I talk. That's probably not a good response. So help me, help us.
Yeah, I mean, radical acceptance of each other needs to be part of what Black couples need to definitely engage in. I will have to say, what sets apart Black families and Black couples in particular are the stereotypes. So there's these stereotypes of Black women and these stereotypes of Black men, and we know that we get that from the world that we live in. We get that when we step outside of our homes. I think what makes it very unique for a lot of Black couples is when it starts to become you identify with these stereotypes. So if you have a conflict, if your partner does something to make you upset and you have anger towards your partner for what they've said or what they've done, the most compassionate response you could do for someone is to say, yeah, you have the right to be angry. That doesn't mean that it doesn't give you an excuse to express it in terms of rage, but yeah, that should be respected and validated. But in Black couples in particular, you have statements like, oh, you just one of those angry Black women. Well, what you're doing is you're internalizing these stereotypes of Black women and you're taking it out on your partner. Or even the issue with Black men. You're internalizing some of these stereotypes about Black men and then you're taking it out on your partner. And I think that we all need to become aware of how we are seeing each other through the lens of oppressive systems and oppressive, I mean, stereotype is a lie. And so what happens if I reduce you down to an angry Black woman, then I don't see who you are. I'm missing all the nuts that and crannies that makes up who you are, Justin, and who you are, Antia, and all of that. I'm not seeing you or listening to you or validating you. So that's what happens in Black couples that sets us apart uniquely is the lack of empathy there and not seeing each other through the lens of what's oppressing you when we go to work every day. When I'm teaching at my university, I'm standing in front of a group of students, white students. Are they taking out their issues of Black women on me? It could be something, I'm facing that, but you don't want to face that in your homes. That's what makes Black couples unique. Mindful communication is challenging this. It's is having you say, okay, it's not saying that these stereotypes you just need to just get rid of them. It's noticing when the stereotypes are coming up. It's paying attention to your thoughts and ideas when someone is expressing something deeply painful to them because it can only be done in an intimate relationship, right? And so it is noticing when you're not listening to your partner, but instead carrying out a stereotype or something that's oppressive, because putting you in a box is oppressive. And so, yeah, I mean, those are the things that I try to deconstruct. I try to, you have a free book club that we're reading about mindfulness and how we talk to each other and communicate. And in the killing part about it is that, okay, the book is written by this white social worker, this gentleman, but when you look at mindfulness, that's who and what we are. That's our science. And I try to emphasize this. I'm like, listen, when we were invaded during the transatlantic slave and even before then, white people came with their guns and their Bibles. That's what they came with. And so they removed us from who and what we were. And so every time, and I don't know if we can get into this red pill community. I mean, there's this real conservative sort of thinking that's very oppressive to women. That's whiteness. So I'm trying to like tease some of that out to say, listen, red pill community that's dominated by a lot of angry Black men, but we don't want to, of course, we want to honor and respect the fact that they have a legitimate reason to be angry. But of course, we don't want to further that taking that anger and putting it on an entire group of people or blaming feminism. Your marriage fell apart because of feminism. No, it's because you weren't listening to your partner. You weren't having this mindful communication. So that's just my work in trying to tease through some of this and say time out. Let's slow this conversation down and let's get more to mindfulness and thinking about what is coming up for us instead of reacting to it.
And so, along those lines, what do you think is like one major don't that should not happen in communication with between a couple?
Well, this is what research tells us is that there's the difference between whether you can have a healthy relationship or one that is toxic and all over the place. And we know it's emotional regulation. If you can in the moment, are able to regulate yourself when you're being triggered, and you're able to incorporate mindfulness in that when you when you're triggered and paying attention to what's coming up for you, and then after you're triggered having some thinking about it, knowing when to back off, knowing when to be mindful instead of just reactive, and having this emotional regulation that is causing you to say and do things that you normally wouldn't do. If you're able to contain some of that, that's the demarcation between a healthy relationship and one that is not healthy. And Bowen, there's a wonderful researcher named Bowen. You got to take his quiz, and I offer my quiz. I have different workbooks or whatever that I sell, and I offer that quiz, and I have a whole thing on this is the quiz that you need to give somebody to know if they are capable of having a healthy relationship, or something where you can reflect on it and say, okay, if you scored really high on this, what is it that you need to look at? And Bowen was really wonderful at identifying the emotional regulation piece and having some sort of measure for how well you're able to control your emotions. So there's one piece that really helps, and I think it's emotional regulation. And we know for a lot of Black people, what makes us unique is, this generational trauma and being felt disregarded. And, it comes straight from slavery. We could pinpoint where it comes from, and that has gone on. And there's some epigenetics research coming out that's really fascinating. And it's saying, but the beauty of this research is that today, in using mindful practices, you can disrupt that because it's been passed down. These patterns of speaking to people, children are to be seen and not heard. That's a slavery term. Like growing up with my dad, he he used to I used to talk about chitlins and greens, and he said that's slavery food. He used to tell me that that's slavery food. Why am I eating that? That's not healthy for me. He would say stuff like that. But he was bringing awareness about how we're passing down things that were in the moment in slavery. That was a survival mechanism. We're not in slavery anymore. And so we need to release ourselves from that and get back to who and what we are as a people.
I I want to pull back and just again thank you. I love the fact that we're having this conversation. Candidly speaking, this is something that I'm also very, very passionate about. So I love that we have the opportunity to talk to you about this. From the many things that you did mention, one thing that I want to expound a little bit more on is this idea of generational trauma, kind of adopting the behaviors of the generations before us. And I see how that actually ties into maybe how we interact when it comes to relationships. For the three of us here, and then those for our listeners, some of us may come from single family households. Maybe you had a mother and father in the household. Maybe your mother and father were always at not necessarily on best terms. Maybe they are on great terms. And just really looking at that and seeing how it kind of seeps into your fabric of how you interact or how you engage in relationships. And I guess it also helps us determine the type of attachment style that we have when we're engaging in whether it's relationships, romantic relationships, or just personal relationships. So I just wanted to make sure to call that out, which I'll go back to a little bit later. But going in line with what Ante was talking about earlier with mindful communication, one thing that I think is something that is a constant conversation. It's always a constant conversation for debate. So we're hoping, as the expert, you can kind of draw that line in the sand. And it's talking about real intimacy. I think there's always that whole term of men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Maybe it's the other way around. I don't remember. But there's always a very different concept of what intimacy is and what it isn't. Sometimes it's like, well, how physical are we in our relationship? How much are we expressing our love? And I think that's a facet of it, but that's not the end all be all of it. So, Dr. Alicia, I was hoping you could deliver us to the audience of what is intimacy? What is real intimacy?
Yeah, I mean, intimacy is connection. It is connection. And there's five different subtypes of intimacy. There's a spiritual intimacy. How well do you know each other, and your thoughts and ideas about spirituality, about um, religion, even about connecting to your higher self. I mean, think about intimate partners. That's a spiritual connection that you have with that person, and it comes from your story of how you met. What happened that the two of you crossed your paths in the timing of that path? There's some spiritual connection to that. Of course, sexual intimacy is one aspect of it. It's like, how frequent do we want to be in the bedroom? What is comfortable for us? And sharing that with a person. And even for a lot of couples, it's just like, okay, what do we think about monogamy? Is it, and some people, hey, I'm not here to judge, different types of lifestyles, but, having being on the same page with that sort of intimacy. Also, it's emotional intimacy. It's being able to just talk to you about what's going on inside of me. And people have different levels of what they're comfortable with. There's some people who are just an internal processor. They just process things internally and they're not good at talking it out. I'm a talk it out kind of person. So if I'm processing it, I have to go talk to somebody. Who do you share your intimacy with? In intellectual intimacy, what's on your mind? What interesting articles? It's great being married to another person with a doctorate degree because I can have some intellectual conversations there. And then, of course, it's physical intimacy, physical touch, living in the same place. Like all of those aspects are intimacy in which I feel like couples really have to have an explicit conversation, not implied. People don't have these conversations before they get married, not just so that you agree on, not so that you agree with each other about it, but so that you can negotiate what's comfortable for another person because you have these expectations for intimacy. Are they explicitly talked about? Probably should be talked about before you get married. So that it could be a smooth transition and so that you have these expectations that are very clear. A lot of people don't have those expectations down, but I think that um, and I think the whole concept of intimacy is really interesting because I think like because of COVID, it stopped some of this intimacy, and there's a lot of lonely people, and there's a lot of lonely men. I talk to a lot of men who are lonely, and male friendships is difficult, and also male intimate relationships are somewhat difficult because for a lot of men, there's such an abundance of women. But the problem is that are not enough good ones that are that are for, they have all of these other issues that keep them from being vulnerable. And you have to be vulnerable to connect. And that's what a connection is, what is required in order to have intimacy with somebody.
And I think that kind of is the catch-all of allowing yourself the ability to peel those layers and actually be vulnerable. If you're not vulnerable with anybody else, it should be the person that you're spending your, if you're married, you're spending, or married, or that's your life partner, whatever way you may categorize it, a person that you want to build a life with. That should be the one person that you should be able to peel those layers and open yourself or open them to all those different facets of yourself. I
Oh,
think, go ahead.
no, I'm excited here because of the fear that comes with this. And you
Yeah.
mentioned this intergenerational trauma. That is what's happening. If you grew up in a household where you were never encouraged to talk about how you feel, you were never encouraged to talk about how was your day at school. You didn't have anybody who was there for you. Maybe your mom, single parent household, and your mom was busy working and you came home by yourself. Remember the latchkey generation back in my generation? I'm Gen X, okay? The latch key had the key around your neck and you're letting yourself in. You didn't have anybody there to talk to you about how your day went, how were you feeling? Did you have sad times? Because your household is too busy. People are busy with things. If you didn't grow up being comfortable expressing yourself and being vulnerable with another person, how you going to do it in a relationship? You're going to get in a relationship and then that person's going to expect you to just be able to be so comfortable opening up and sharing what's inside of you when you had no practice. And even when you tried to do it, someone told you to shut up and go to bed or shut up and do your work or they shut you down. And it's just like, parents, we understand what the circumstances are for us, but if you were shut down, if you were told that your thoughts and feelings did not matter, that means you don't matter. That's neglect.
It is, and it's unfortunate that in instances where we're children, more often than not, we see this behavior replicated as opposed to this is what I experienced, this is what I'm not going to put onto my child, although this is all that I know, so I don't necessarily have the tools or resources to kind of change the path forward. So even talking about that, when we were talking about emotional intimacy, and we know that it nurtures empathy, it reduces conflict, it improves communication. So it's like, why aren't people doing this as it increases overall relationship satisfaction? To what we've been talking about to this point, I believe it was an article I read in Women's Health. I think it was from like 2023. It talked about attachment theory. It talked about attachment style or patterns of behaviors in relationships. And it looked at, I think it was four categories: secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized were the four. And they were saying how it's compromised if we have a fractured attachment style. And as you've talked about, how fear leads the way. So, for an example, if you and I are having a disagreement, it's hard for me to hear or respect you because my fear instinctually may show up as defensiveness. And then as a result, I'm gonna get angry. I'm gonna just walk away from the discussion, or ultimately I will leave. So it's also that aspect of really how are you nurtured, how are you raised to deal with conflict, to deal with actual like good conversation. How do you operate in those types of systems? And then even when Antia was talking about, I guess, tonality. I think in the last 2 weeks or so, we had a family trip and we were talking about tonality. And I think it's kind of, you want to talk how you talk, but I always try and make sure of, it's kind of like looking in the mirror and seeing how you're talking. It's like, oh, maybe I'm being a little abrasive. I'm excited, but I try and be intentional about how I'm coming off. Just like, how would I feel if somebody said this way to me? So I think it's just that constant self-improvement for yourself, but then also how that improvement lends itself to the relationship.
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about tone. I mean, a better conversation is what is it about my tone that sets you off? How is this tone reminiscent of something you experienced in the past? Because not everybody's going to be taken aback by Antia's tone, but you are. Tell me a story about it. It is about, when I say radical acceptance, part of the radical acceptance is I want to hear a story about it. Tell me a story about how someone treated you with a tone that got you. And then if that person is able to share the story, then I think that's more persuasive. It's saying, okay, some of it is me in my tone, but some of it is my tone is triggering a past painful memory for you. And I think those are better conversations to have, because you can influence somebody with the a story behind it. That's the empathy piece. And then when you talk about attachment styles, yeah, I mean that's important. I mean, having a secure attachment is, I mean, hands down, secure attachments are the best type of attachment. You are better with money. You make more mindful. Talk about mindfulness, right? You're not going to be as triggery. All of these things aren't going to happen. But the other attachment styles, find out what is it with you. Just self-awareness. Like, okay, avoiding attachment styles. Well, if you feel like conflict is happening and you get nervous when conflict happens, then you're going to want to shut it down. You're going to want to avoid. If your partner has a tone that you don't like, you're not going to share it. You're just going to avoid her or him. And that person left scratching their head like, where'd they go? How come they didn't, we're supposed to hang out today. Where'd they go? You disappear on somebody. And you're avoiding something because of the fear. And remember, the bottom line for insecure attachments is the fear. Anxious attachment is, I just want to keep talking about it till the cows come home. I'm just gonna really, really, you're gonna start chasing someone, and pay attention to me and accept me, and you want to talk about it. Those anxious attachment, and of course, disorganized attachment. It's almost where it's kind of like, I want you to be close to me. I want intimacy. You're asking for this intimacy. And as soon as somebody gets close, become afraid and you start pushing them away. And they call it disorganized because it's like, okay, wait, do you want me to be close? Or are you pushing me away? I can't tell what you want me to do, because closeness, although you yearn for closeness and intimacy, when you actually get it, it becomes overwhelming and you start to worry about it instead of dealing with the anxiety attached to that. And then you push people away. So, I mean, yeah, your secure attachments, um, you know, the way you are attached to another person um, can definitely come up in conflictual situations when you're in an intimate relationship. And I gotta tell everybody, it is different. Can be similar, but an intimate partner, it is in a whole nother league by itself. It's not the same with how you are at work, how you are with your friends, how you are, all of that. You cannot compare. It's apples and oranges. There is nothing like the person that you decide to marry. It hurts deeper, it cuts deeper. Because you have the familiarity with that person. I know in my doctoral program when I was getting my doctorate, there were white people that was being white. They were just being white. They were taking out their issues with black women out on me, and that's okay. But when another black faculty member did me in, that's when I was crying in my car. I would never do that in front of anybody because no. But I got to my car, it hurt more because these are the people that I'm more connected with because they're more like me. So it's like that in intimate partner. A stranger says something about you, you're like, whatever. But if your partner says it's a sensitive topic for you because of the intimacy.
I was having flashbacks to teaching. So I don't know if I've mentioned this in the podcast. I probably have. I'm a tenured associate professor of psych. So as he was talking about secure attachments, I'm like, oh, child development, developmental psych. Like I'm just hearing all that. And one thing that I remember, because I'm not teaching psych currently, but one thing I remember always saying is, remember this starts in childhood, and
Hmm.
it usually comes from your parents, right?
It
There's
comes
usually
from
that.
the parents. Yeah.
Yeah. So this idea of um, this was already ingrained in me from childhood, before, way before I even met this particular person, right? But it's still impacting me regardless, even if it was 20, 30 years ago. So that makes me think of another topic that I wanted to talk about with you, which is this idea of healing before hookups.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I am an avid dating reality show watcher. I find it is the best type of TV for me after a long day or a long week. And I'm always overanalyzing the whole thing. I'm like, oh, she should have went to therapy before she came on this show because she is not ready. And there's actually a show called was it Ready to Love or Ready for Love?
Hmm. Hmm.
Which I love. I just got into that show. And when they kick people off the show, they'll say, I'm sorry, you're not ready to love. And I'm like, mm-mm, she wasn't ready. And because I'm thinking to myself, like, she has too many issues. She needed to take care of all that stuff first. And so basically, this entire conversation, I'm just thinking about like how so much of our past, whether it be past relationships, family relationships, past romantic relationships, and how so much of that impacts us later on and like down the line and keeps impacting us in our interactions, especially in our romantic relationships. So can you talk a little bit more about this idea of healing before hookup?
Yeah, and the goal is not perfection. The goal is not to be a perfect individual and now you're ready for a relationship. The goal is self-awareness. The goal is being open to grow. The goal is knowing that you're not perfect. And the goal is accountability, being able to take accountability, being able to say, God, that just got me going. I wonder, let me stop and think about what happens there. It's being open and being ready, ready to love, is being ready to listen to what you've done or said and the impact it has on another person and being mindful of that and showing that you have some self-awareness and some sort of insight into your behavior, or at least coming from an orientation where you're open and willing to look at your part in the relationship. What's your part? If you see your part, are you able to take accountability for your part? Say you're sorry. Are you able to have empathy for another person? That is taking yourself out of it and putting yourself in another person's shoes so that you can see it from another person's perspective without it damaging your self-esteem. And I mean, I think if you can do those things, and for some people, it does take a therapy for them to be able to look at that and still hold your own. It's like you need to be able to say, I made that mistake. That doesn't mean that I'm a mistake. Because if you start taking it personal as a person, How are you ever going to take accountability? How are you ever going to apologize? How are you ever going to put yourself in someone else's shoes and have that empathy because it's all about you and your ego? Your ego. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, some people ain't there are some people, there are couples I have in my office where I'm just like, don't get married. I will actually say that I do not recommend marriage at this point. You guys got a lot more things that you need to work on before you get married. And I applaud both of you for being here and recognizing that there are issues. That's the beauty of it. So you got to end with the positivity because that is great that you're here and you've recognized together some things need to change and some things need to be sorted out. That's beautiful. But sometimes I would say you're not quite ready for marriage. I do not recommend. I have said that to a lot of people. I do not recommend marriage. Now, if they're already married, I try to instill hope that things can get better. And I always instill hope. I want all my couples to get better, but more importantly, I want them to be self-actualized, whether they stay together or not. But, hey, it's a journey. We're all on a journey and it's okay. I'm not going to demonize or shame someone because a marriage was dissolved. I mean, we're talking about Black women and just saying, I've had enough, and sometimes these Black women have been through a lot. And even when they feel like they're at their wits' end, they're like, you know what? I'm going to go around the corner again. Let's try it again. And, if that communication in a way, and it could be her tone, and these conversations aren't had, then it can destroy a marriage for sure.
One thing that came up on one of the shows I watched, which I thought was really interesting, was there was a person who they clearly had a lot of hurt that they were still carrying.
Mhm.
Um, and it was impacting every interaction that they were having with these quote unquote dates that they were on. And one of the people said, "Well, maybe they are ready, or maybe you can help them be ready. Like maybe the goal should be that they get in this good relationship with you, and that's gonna quote unquote fix them." So instead of them taking the time to possibly find some healing prior to the relationship, the idea was, well, this relationship is the thing that's actually going to heal you. So, what are your thoughts on that idea?
That is the thing. It is, again, it is the ability to be able to look back on things. It's the ability to be able to say, I am hurt by what this person has said. What does that mean? What is it about that person's ability to hurt me in that way? What is it about what they've said and why does it hurt me? It is that ability to be able to reflect. And if being in a relationship is causing a lot of fear, like crippling fear, yeah, maybe it's time to take a time out and let that person deal with their own issues if they're able to recognize that they have all of these issues that they need to deal with. But, eventually, if you're going on these dates with everybody and it's starting to have a pattern and it's repeating themselves over and over and over again, you're the common denominator. And it's the ability to be able to look at that, and you're putting too much on another person to expect that other person to heal all of this stuff. I mean, you have to come into the relationship a little bit whole, a little bit with the ability to be able to say, again, I'm not perfect, but I have worked on myself. On Sunday nights, I have a free book club, and there's 5 aspects of mindfulness, and we go through the 5 A's: acceptance, appreciation, affection, allowing, and there's a fifth one. But we talk about all of those, and a healthy relationship is your ease in providing attention to your partner, undivided attention, and your ability to receive attention. affection. How affectionate can you be with your partner comfortably? And are you comfortable with receiving that affection? Undivided attention, affection, appreciation for your partner, and being appreciated. Um, allowing that person to be who and what they are without feeling judged, and then you don't judge, and they don't judge you. It's all of these aspects of what mindfulness entails. And as long as you can keep that going, you have to be able to give it and receive it as well. And if you're not able to do that, how can you expect another partner to be responsible for you? You check yourself. It's too much to have one person be responsible for healing another person.
One of the things that I've pulled out from this conversation, and I'm hoping the listeners as well, is when a lot of the things that we're operating in externally also requires us to make sure that we are being accountable and looking internally. And it's whether it's generational trauma, whether it's how I was raised, how somebody was spoken to, how I react to things, XYZ. And it's finding the way to, shameless plug for us, community of healing, but also a plug for you when it comes to healing. I could say for myself, I've intentionally dove into books or whether it's articles that allow me to kind of assess what's going on in my mind. And if even if I can't articulate it to my partner, it's like, well, let me read a little bit about it. Let me dive into some type of literature that'll help me. And with that, we want to pivot to your own book club, as you've mentioned throughout, but we haven't officially given it a name. So your Healing Haven Book Club, which I
Yes.
believe, if I'm correct, has just come off its season 8 finale.
The book club. Okay, so we're reading this book about mindfulness, how to be an adult in relationships. By the
Yes.
way, it's written by David Rico, and I interviewed him. I interviewed him, so I have that interview there. And you could go to draliciabookclub.com. It's not a plug because it's free to join. It's totally free. It's for any and everybody who wants to know how to be an adult in relationships. And it's the 5 keys to mindful loving. And I wrote it down. It's attention, appreciation, acceptance, affection, and allowance. So it's accepting that other person. And so how are you going to accept someone else if you don't accept yourself? You have to accept these aspects of yourself. And so we've been talking about it. We are on chapter 8, so we're almost done with this book. I don't know what my next book will be, but it will be somewhere along the lines of mindfulness and a lot of the concepts in David Rico. But I'm having the people who come and attend, we're gonna do a vote and see. It's gonna be something about emotion. It's gonna be something that us as Black people, we just need to embrace our own science. This is our science. I mean, good grief, the Black woman is the cradle of civilization. Science tells us that. How do we get back to this? Now, I'm not trying to like make Black women great again. I'm not trying to do all that, but I'm trying to have us repair and heal because we've been cut off from who and what we are. And we are a traumatized group of people, listen, I do not live in Gary, Indiana, but when there's crime happening in Gary, Indiana, it affects me. When things happen in Tuskegee, Alabama, I was down there because my daughter goes to college there. And I look around at that city of which I was born in and was raised in. My dad taught at Tuskegee University. So I'm the second generation healer at a university and college professor. And I grew up there. And everything that happens there, it affects me even though I'm not physically there. So, as a group of people, when I read about the pain of any Black person in this country, I'm connected to that, although I live in a nice little white suburb. That's just how it turned out. But, I'm affected by those things. And so, how do we get back to what it is, who and what we are, which is peace? I mean, which is honoring and respecting each other. That's what we were. And that's my ultimate goal, in a way. That is my ultimate goal. And I do a lot of work about mindfulness when it comes to shopping, when it comes to spending our money, being mindful in how we spend our money. Because right now, I'm like, wherever I spend my money, part of the healing for me is I'm going to look up, okay, what's this company? What's this company about? Where are they connected to? I'm not shoveling my dollars into a corporation that's not out for my best interest. I'm not going to listen to music that is derogatory toward my people, toward me. I don't want my children listening to it. You don't want your children listening to it. So why are you putting it out there? There was an interview. I know I'm changing the subject a little bit. It just makes me mad. There was an interview with 50 Cent way back 20 years ago when he did In the Club. And they interviewed him, and he had his a child or whatever, and they said, "Would you have your child listen to your music?" And he was like, he scrunched up his face. He was like, "No, I would never have him listen to my music." I said, "Really?" So it's on repeat and on the airways so my children can listen to it, but you don't really care. I mean, that is if someone paid you $1 million to pour poison in the drinking water of the people in your community, you're trying to tell me that that's what you're doing. Well, that's what people are doing in their music. So again, it's multi-level, it's meso, micro, macro level things that need to change so that we can become healed.
I think, as you said, when it comes to just leading with intentionality, it's something that obviously it's something that you practice while preaching. Again, going back to your Healing Haven community, because you have your book club. I believe you also have coursework. But while we're having this stage to talk to anybody, to talk to everybody, are there any other items that you would want to point folks to that are trying to get more connected to you, or current projects or upcoming things?
Every time I think about it, I go, Alicia, stop being so ambitious. And then I say, tone it down. And then I go, oh, I got this going on, this going on. Yeah, so I have started a retreat business. Lord. So I'm having healing retreats, small, intimate, in-person retreats. I have just launched that like the month of October, October 1st, I have launched that. So the retreat business, I have the book club, Healing Haven Book Club. I also do a lot of work individually. I do a lot of talks. I speak at conferences. And Oh my gosh. And I have all sorts of courses. Oh my gosh. I have like 5 courses. I have a drama-free relationship where I talk about drama-free marriage. What do you need to talk about? What expectations, like intimacy? What expectations do we need to have before we get married? And we need to sort these out first. So I have that. I also have the drama-free marriage, where we look at blended families because 70% of all families are blended. And this is across the board. So, how do we deal with those things? Multiple households, boundaries there. And then also drama free communication, how we speak to each other. That is one product. Also, healing finances. I do a lot of work with my husband. Some people know him, Dr. Boyce Watkins. We do a lot of work together on healing when it comes to finances. He has his own piece there that he's doing remarkable, wonderful work, of course, in that aspect. And then I have the individual healing piece where there's courses and workbooks and all of these things. And I also have products. My goodness, I sell healing candles and bath salts and all the stuff that keeps this mindfulness and meditation going so that we can be mindful in how we talk to each other and not so reactive. I probably am not thinking of all of it, but the best thing to do to get a hold of me is to follow me on Instagram, Coaching with Dr. Alicia, and of course my website, Coaching with Dr. Alicia. And there we go. There's probably some more that I'm forgetting, but that's all I can think about right now.
So, thank you for sharing all the things, even though I'm sure you did forget something
I
because you had
probably
a whole,
did, but it's
I'm sure you
okay.
did. But they're going to go to your website, they're going to follow you on Instagram, and they're going to find out that thing that you forgot. But at the same time, I'm sure they'll go there because there's a lot of things you mentioned that I'm sure they want to be a part of, especially those retreats and joining those
Yeah.
courses and everything. Hard to believe, but we are at our last question, which is always the saddest part for me because I just love, love, love these conversations. I know I've learned a lot already. I'm sure Justin has. I feel like he was down. I feel like he was taking notes. I think I saw him with a pen and paper. Uh, we have our last question, which I said was a surprise. And it is Dr. Alicia Watkins. What brings you joy?
Oh, what brings me joy is the work I do every day. It really does. I can't even like sometimes I just go like I can't believe I get paid for this. I'm a terrible businesswoman because I have to hire another person to go and collect payments from people because I would just do this for free. It is such a joy to carry on this legacy that I feel like I really do feel like I'm part of a bigger network of healers. I think that I don't know, I didn't talk about this, but I do my own meditations. And and in these meditations I go to California and I dibble and dabble in a little bit of plant medicine and all of this just so that I can just kind of heighten and have a conversation with myself. And and that's what I've been um come to realize. That's what I've come to realize, that my cause and what brings me joy, which is also the reason why I do have to unplug and meditate so that I can continue my purpose in life. It really is being part of a healing community in which we need to be okay because we're not okay. We are not okay. And part of the issue of going to being not okay to being okay is recognizing that you're not okay, and then passing through that tunnel to okay, there is no repressing, there is no squishing it down and ignoring it or avoiding it or being afraid of it. We have to take on the fact that we're not okay as a group of people, um, and once we realize that, that's when we can get to the other side of healing, and that brings me joy. It really, really does. I'm also an avid runner, and I love to run, and I love hanging out with my kids and just doing plants and incense and things like that that bring me a lot of joy as well. Being a mother is, you know, is joyful. When they go off to college, I'm in tears. I'm crying like a baby. But that brings me joy to see people. I want my children to go out there, and I do want them to be representative of some of the lessons hopefully I've instilled in them in my household. And just being a model for them. It wasn't perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect childhood. But and it wasn't that way for me, and it wasn't that way for them. But I do want them to go out into the world thinking that they can do whatever they can do. Anything that pops into their head that they want to accomplish, they have the ability to do it, or they wouldn't have thought it in the first place. So that's what I try to instill on people, and that brings me joy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing with us today, sharing with our audience. Thank you for all that you offer to families, individuals, couples who are in need of healing, which we are very well aware of from
Yeah.
our work as well. It has been an absolute pleasure meeting you and speaking with you today. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you too.
Thank you.